Rowan is using an incorrect kick. This is resulting in a screw kick type movement as seen here. Rowan is also kicking at the same time as he pulls. This is creating a burst of movement followed by coming to a dead stop due to the poor recovery in his legs and arms. Rowan's incorrect kick leads to a recovery that is creating a large amount of drag. You can see his knees moving up to the 90 degrees of his body. As mentioned before, Rowan's arm stroke is occurring at the same time as his kick. Rowan's arms are straight from the streamlined position all the way down his sides. Rowan is gliding with his arms next to his body rather than out the front in the recovery position. His elbows are not high and bent like they should be. His hands are returned to the recovery position by moving along the body line, and they are moved separately rather than streamlined together. Rowan will practice the breaststroke whip kick on the ground before using the pool buoy in the water. We now see, since Rowan is forced to hold the pool buoy between his knees, he is better able to move his legs through the recovery, outsweep and in-sweep phases of the whip kick. An effective whip kick should see Rowan bringing his heels together towards his bum, quickly minimizing the hip flexion with knees by inclining the body so as to reduce the drag he was creating with his knees before. The ankle tap kicking exercise builds on the basics before developing greater degrees of freedom in Rowan's whip kick. By requiring him to bring his feet to his hands, Rowan is learning to put his feet in the position far enough forward where they will be able to create greater propulsion for longer due to the larger range of motion. Rowan will now begin activities to develop the triphasic pulling stroke. To develop an outsweep in Rowan's stroke, we'll be using the pull hand clap. As you can see, Rowan is only able to move his hands to the outsweep position before bringing them back to the recovery position. To teach how to execute an effective in-sweep, Rowan was required to swim next to the float line and make his elbow touch it each time he in-sweeps. This has the effect of making Rowan hold his elbows up to create propulsion as his hands and forearms move through the in-sweep. To teach how to return his hands from the in-sweep to the recovery, Rowan was to show the shark fin breaststroke. This will develop his low drag return to recovery and develop some propulsion from bringing his elbows together. Through these remediation activities, we have taught Rowan to better use his effort to create propulsion and create less drag through the water. The result is a greater summation of forces that will ultimately move him faster with less effort.
As you can see, Ben is kicking from his knee rather than his hips. His knees are also breaking the surface of the water. As a result of this kicking style, he is creating unnecessary drag and damaging his body position. Another flaw that can be seen is that Ben is not rotating his body enough to maximise his arm reach. Consequently, he is not optimising his range and not maximising the drive he could create. Also, another flaw that can be identified is that Ben's hand and arm entry is not optimal. He is continually slapping the water, dragging bubbles down as he strokes, and he reduces the amount of clean water that he can hold onto, which reduces his drive capacity. Finally, as Ben is stroking, he is taking his arm very deep in the water. When he is dragging his arm back up, he is pulling himself down and creating unnecessary drag. Ben has demonstrated that he does not rotate his body while backstroking. To remedy this, Ben will use the sexy shoulder method to develop his body roll whilst kicking. As you can see, he is kicking 4 times on each side and being required to lift his shoulder from the water at the same time. This rotating will free up more degrees of freedom so that the stroke will reach further forward in the water, thus resulting in a longer downsweep which will create more propulsion. Ben will now use the single arm stroke to further build on the sexy shoulder exercise and will be encouraged to reach forward as far as he can before his hand enters the water. This will help Ben develop a feel for the importance of reaching forward as far as possible, as he will notice the differences in propulsion. Now that Ben has learned the importance of body rotation in relation to getting the longest downsweep possible, we will now remedy the splashing hand entry that Ben has demonstrated by using the periscope arm method. This will give Ben time to focus on the clean entry of his hands in the water. As you can see, Ben's hands are entering the water without the masses of bubbles that accompany his hands before remediation. This more effective hand entry has allowed Ben's stroke to create more resistance due to the lack of bubbles against his hand. Through this remediation, we have further refined Ben's backstroke by breaking his swimming style into its problem areas, rectifying them individually and applying them in an example of improved backstroking. Newell calls this assembling a coordination pattern, as Ben has learned single components of the backstroke and then later applied each of these components together to gain control of a coordinative structure.